Admiral laughed and asked for her rank, until he heard base general and froze in fear. The dining hall hummed with muted chatter, trays scraping across tables, and the distant roar of jets overhead. Amid the familiar chaos, one figure sat alone, still and unassuming. No rank, no name, only quiet certainty. No one noticed her yet, but someone would, and it would change everything. Lieutenant Commander Elara Morgan sat at the corner table of Fort Braddock's sprawling officers' mess, her posture rigid yet composed. Olive green flight suit perfectly pressed, hair tucked neatly beneath the regulation bun. The clatter of utensils, murmured conversations, and distant engines thrummed around her like an incessant heartbeat, but she existed in a pocket of stillness. A simple metal tray held her lunch, steamed vegetables, chicken breast, and rice, but her eyes were far away, scanning the windows at the far end of the hall. From the entrance, the doors swung wide, admitting a wave of crisp, white uniforms. At the center of this procession was Vice Admiral Richard Hawk Calloway. His presence seemed to bend the room. Ribbons and medals stacked high across his chest, gold shoulder stripes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His booming voice carried authority and expectation. Behind him, aides trailed like shadows, executing unspoken orders with precision. Calloway's eyes swept the room, pausing almost instinctively on Elara. A smirk formed, a mix of curiosity and amusement, as if he had spotted a small anomaly in an otherwise predictable system. "Who's this?" he asked aloud, loud enough to draw glances. One young lieutenant chuckled nervously, exchanging a glance with his colleague. Elara didn't flinch. She didn't look up. Her fork moved deliberately, methodically, almost meditatively. As Calloway approached, his boots heavy against the tiled floor, he planted himself firmly beside her table. "Lieutenant," he boomed, misidentifying her branch and intentionally lowering her rank. The room's chatter dipped, all eyes turned. Elara's gaze remained fixed on her plate for a heartbeat longer, then slowly lifted. Dark, steady, unyielding, eyes that measured and catalogued without a hint of emotion. One aide stepped forward, voice tinged with bravado. "Sir, this area is for senior officers only. She'll have to move." Elara Morgan's lips curved only slightly, a ghost of a smile, before she met the aide's gaze. "This is a general mess," she said softly, precise, almost clinical. "There are no reserved tables." The room went quiet. Calloway's smirk faltered. Here was defiance disguised as serenity, and it unnerved him more than any challenge he had faced in decades. Calloway's laugh rolled across the hall, booming and theatrical, intended to reclaim dominance. "Out of professional courtesy, I'll ask again. Move to another table." His hands rested on his hips, chest puffed, a predator sizing up prey. The aide's knuckles whitened as he prepared to enforce the Admiral's command. Yet Elara did not move. Her hand continued to lift forkfuls of food, her calm in sharp contrast to the simmering tension around her. The first lieutenant edged closer, intent on confrontation. "Step aside, Lieutenant. Now." Elara finally rose, not in compliance, but in preparation. She moved fluidly, a subtle shift in weight and position that redirected the lieutenant's momentum before he could grasp her arm. The movement was almost imperceptible, yet it unbalanced him completely, a perfect marriage of physics and anticipation. Two more aides stepped in, and within seconds, the entire engagement unfolded like a silent, precise choreography. Eyes widened, mouths opened. Not a single word escaped her. By the time she returned to her seat, trays untouched, posture unbroken, the hall was frozen. Calloway's face shifted from amusement to disbelief, jaw tight. Here was no mere officer, this was mastery incarnate. The aides retreated, muttering excuses, while whispers rippled across tables. No one spoke, but everyone watched. Elara took another bite, slowly, deliberately, as if nothing had happened. Her serenity was a statement, a mirror reflecting the chaos of those who believed power came from uniform or rank. Calloway's fury simmered behind his mask of composure. He was used to obedience, instant compliance. Never had he encountered a human wall of certainty so impenetrable. "What's your name?" he demanded, voice cracking ever so slightly. Silence answered. The room's collective breath seemed to pause. The audacity of it, a lieutenant remaining calm, unmoved by the storm of an admiral's rage, was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. One aide shifted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Elara simply continued her meal, eyes unwavering, calm like a glacier that had survived centuries of storms. The moment stretched. Time slowed. Calloway's aura of authority clashed with her quiet certainty. Every inch of the hall was aware. This was no ordinary encounter. Something fundamental had shifted, and the Admiral felt it. He had met defiance, but it was not the rebellious kind. It was the quiet, immovable truth of someone who had earned their place without needing anyone else to validate it. Elara rose at last, setting her tray with deliberate care. The act was ceremonial, a closing of one chapter. She walked past Calloway, past the aides, the silence following her like a shadow. No glance, no acknowledgement, only motion imbued with dignity. The hall seemed to exhale collectively. She reached the doors and stepped outside, the humid afternoon air of Fort Braddock wrapping around her like a cloak. The Admiral's fury surged, teeth clenched, yet he remained rooted, unable to intervene. Commander Hill, his closest aide, leaned in. "Sir, perhaps we—" Calloway cut him off, voice ice and sharp. "Do not question my command. Find her. Now." Hill hesitated, unsure whether to pursue someone whose presence seemed to make the Admiral powerless. The hesitation was enough. Elara had already disappeared beyond the mess doors, a silhouette against the glaring sunlight. Back in her quarters, Elara moved with methodical efficiency. Spartan and organized, the room was functional, nothing more. A laptop lay closed on her desk, alongside a single photograph of a craggy mountain range. A footlocker in the corner held her true treasures, and with a practiced sequence, she unlocked it. Inside lay meticulously restored insignia from units long disbanded, patches, coins, and a silver star glinting in the dim light. She lifted a circular patch, the phoenix, wings shaped like stylized antennae. It represented a different battlefield, one invisible, precise, and unforgiving, the realm of electronic warfare and intelligence. Here, pattern recognition, strategy, and patience mattered more than rank. She traced the embroidery with her thumb, a silent ritual of grounding herself. Every symbol told a story of battles fought without spectacle, victories earned without applause. Then came the log. Her laptop opened to a stark interface. She catalogued every detail of the mess incident, verbal provocation, escalation, and her tactical response. Each action, each reaction was a data point. Thorne, no, Calloway, was merely one node in a network of systemic errors. She was the observer, the analyst, the silent hand guiding outcomes without the world knowing. As she logged the encounter, her face remained impassive. The outside world was loud, chaotic, full of ego and spectacle. Inside this room, she held the power of knowledge and preparation. Her role was not to seek glory but to ensure that those who wielded authority did so with humility, or at least, learned the cost of arrogance. Preparation for the upcoming Iron Sentinel exercise was meticulous. Elara's designs for simulated adversary networks were complex, invisible, and devastatingly precise. They mirrored the unpredictability of human error and exploited it with surgical efficiency. Calloway's carrier group would soon face her creations in a controlled yet revealing environment, unaware that the true challenge was not technology, but strategy and composure. She reviewed her notes, red lines drawn across digital schematics, simulations calibrated for every possible response. Every sequence was tested, retested, and optimized. Even a minor oversight could compromise the result. Her mind worked like a finely tuned instrument, one that translated chaos into clarity, uncertainty into actionable insight. This was her battlefield, and she was its master. Her actions in the mess were no accident. They were a demonstration of equilibrium under pressure, of authority earned through skill rather than display. Every flick of the wrist, every subtle redirection of force, had been calculated to reveal the cracks in arrogance without causing irreparable harm. The Admiral had underestimated her. Soon, the system would reveal the consequences. Outside, Fort Braddock buzzed with routine operations. Jets thundered overhead, officers moved with practiced precision, yet none were aware of the silent force shaping their fates. Elara was everywhere and nowhere, a ghost in uniform, orchestrating outcomes from the shadows. Her calm contrasted with the storm that awaited Calloway. The tension simmered like a coiled spring. Those who relied solely on position and display would soon confront reality in its most uncompromising form. In the coming exercise, every assumption would be tested, every ego challenged. The Admiral's authority was unquestioned on paper, yet the first cracks had already begun to appear, invisible to all but one. At dusk, Elara walked the perimeter of the base, observing, absorbing, and recalibrating. The sunset painted the sky in shades of fire, a quiet echo of the phoenix she carried in her locker. It symbolized rebirth, resilience, and silent power. Tomorrow would not be the same. Not for her. Not for anyone who underestimated her. The morning of Iron Sentinel dawned clear and crisp. Mist hovered over the airfield, blurring the edges of jets and towers. Calloway arrived early, his entourage trailing, exuding confidence and impatience. Yet even before the exercise began, he sensed an unfamiliar tension, a subtle awareness that something was off, though he could not articulate it. Elara moved among the operations staff, her uniform clean and plain, rank stripped to a single indication of authority within her immediate circle. She spoke quietly, directing personnel, adjusting simulations, and monitoring every system. Each action was deliberate, calibrated, and precise. Her presence was felt even by those who did not know her, a quiet gravity that shaped outcomes without fanfare. As the exercise commenced, Calloway assumed control with his usual authority. Fleet movements, simulated strikes, and countermeasures were executed with precision. Yet Elara's designs began to unfold. Simulated communications failed, command decisions were delayed, and unexpected vulnerabilities appeared. Every hesitation, every moment of doubt, was magnified, exposing cracks in judgment and reliance on status over skill. Calloway's frustration mounted as the anomalies grew. Every attempt to regain control was countered by patterns he could not anticipate. He was not facing another officer, not a human adversary. He was facing a system of meticulous design, invisible yet absolute. Each misstep, each misjudgment, reflected his own assumptions about authority. The room was electric with tension, officers and aides watching the unraveling of a meticulously planned scenario. Whispers spread, eyes darted, and yet Elara remained composed, observing, adjusting, and guiding outcomes. The calm of one person contrasted sharply with the chaos of those who relied on rank and reputation rather than competence and foresight. When the exercise concluded, the results were undeniable. Calloway had performed admirably on paper, yet the simulation exposed critical vulnerabilities, all traced to decisions influenced by arrogance, impatience, and underestimation. Elara stood quietly at the perimeter, her work complete, her presence unnoticed by most, yet its impact indelible. Calloway sat in his temporary flag office, chest heaving, jaw tight, replaying every misstep of the morning exercise. His aides hovered nervously, unsure whether to offer excuses or explanations. Each failed maneuver gnawed at him, not because he had lost, but because the failure had been orchestrated without his knowledge, and by someone so unassuming, so invisible. Elara's presence loomed everywhere yet nowhere. Behind screens, through simulations, in subtle adjustments to the system, she had rewritten the rules. The Admiral, so accustomed to unquestioned obedience, felt unmoored. Pride warred with confusion, fury battled humiliation. He had faced adversity before, but never a quiet, calculated intelligence that did not seek recognition or revenge, only results. Meanwhile, Elara observed from the operations deck, eyes scanning multiple screens, fingers tracing invisible lines of influence. She adjusted, adapted, and refined without a single wasted motion. Her team moved like extensions of her will, yet she never gave orders loudly or demanded attention. Her authority was invisible, fluid, and absolute. Calloway finally demanded a briefing. His voice, though controlled, carried tension that made even senior officers pause. Elara entered the room, plain uniform, unadorned, her presence understated but undeniable. She carried no ceremonial airs, yet when she spoke, the room shifted. Her voice was calm, precise, and measured. Every word cut through the haze of ego and assumption, revealing the hidden truths of the morning's failures. The Admiral's face flushed. "Explain these failures," he barked. But Elara did not flinch. She walked slowly around the room, pointing to screens, detailing patterns, decisions, and vulnerabilities. Every observation was rooted in logic and human behavior, not rank or prestige. She showed, not told. By the time she finished, the officers understood. They had been blind to their own assumptions. Silence followed. Calloway's hands clenched into fists. He realized that the real lesson was not the simulation itself, but the humility it demanded. He had been confronted with an invisible force, one that reminded him that authority alone could not guarantee competence. Elara returned to her seat quietly, the room still echoing with the weight of her insight. Later that afternoon, Elara walked the base perimeter again, watching personnel practice maneuvers, jets roar overhead, and the sunlight dance across the tarmac. The calm serenity of the scene contrasted with the storm she had orchestrated inside. She felt no pride, only a quiet satisfaction that the system had spoken its truth. Calloway, meanwhile, moved among his officers, attempting to maintain composure. His ego had been bruised, and for the first time, he realized that rank was a fragile shield against insight. Every misjudgment of the morning's exercise replayed in his mind, each a reminder of the unseen forces that influenced outcomes. Elara's team gathered for debriefing. She spoke in low tones, emphasizing patterns, behavior, and anticipation. Her focus was not on accolades or recognition. It was on learning, understanding, and ensuring future resilience. Those who listened could sense a presence that demanded attention, not through command but through understanding. As dusk approached, a quiet tension lingered in the base. Calloway retreated to his quarters, alone, and reviewed the exercise again. The data was meticulous, revealing subtle failures he had overlooked. He realized that every assumption he had relied upon had been challenged, and the realization was both humbling and unnerving. Elara, standing by the observation tower, watched the sun set over the distant mountains. The sky glowed in shades of orange and crimson, the same colors as the phoenix patch she kept tucked away. A symbol of resilience, renewal, and silent power. She touched the insignia beneath her sleeve and felt a quiet connection to every decision, every calculated move that had brought clarity to the chaos. The next morning, Fort Braddock buzzed with activity again. Calloway, still simmering from the previous day, approached Elara directly. His stride was purposeful, his eyes searching for challenge or defiance. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, tone clipped but controlled, "a word." Elara looked up from her screens, expression calm. "Yes, sir." Her voice carried no fear, no awe, only focus. They walked together toward a quieter corner of the base. Calloway studied her, plain, unassuming, yet undeniably sharp. Every gesture, every pause seemed deliberate, intentional. He found himself measuring, questioning, even doubting his own judgment. "I underestimated you yesterday," he admitted, tension threading his voice. "Not your skill, but the way you operate." It's different. Elara's gaze did not waver. She did not seek approval, nor offer apology. Instead, she simply nodded, letting her presence convey her understanding of the gravity of command and the fragility of perception. "Do you always work from the shadows?" he asked, a mix of curiosity and admiration creeping into his tone. "I work where I can be most effective," she said softly. "Visibility is a privilege, not a requirement." Calloway absorbed her words, realizing that power was not always loud or ceremonious. It could be subtle, quiet, and absolute. As they walked, he began to recount the morning exercise, acknowledging the mistakes he had made and the assumptions that led to them. Elara listened, making notes only to ensure future operations would benefit from lessons learned. Their conversation was clinical yet human, analytical yet quietly personal. By the time they reached the command tower, Calloway had shifted from frustration to respect. The lesson was not merely tactical, it was moral, emotional, and profoundly humbling. He understood that rank, medals, and authority were meaningless if they blinded a person to truth. Later that week, Elara conducted a training session for junior officers. She moved among them quietly, observing posture, reactions, and unspoken hesitation. When she spoke, her words were precise, almost poetic in their simplicity. She emphasized awareness, patience, and anticipation. Every lesson carried weight beyond tactics. It was about judgment, humility, and human resilience. Calloway observed from the back of the room, hands folded, silent. He felt the shift of authority without ego, the subtle power of someone who commanded respect by competence rather than spectacle. He had faced arrogance all his career. He had faced chaos, adversity, and betrayal. But he had never faced the quiet gravity of absolute skill and clarity, wrapped in humility. One young officer asked a question, nervously fumbling with terminology. Elara smiled briefly, a small, reassuring curve of the lips, and guided him gently to clarity. The room shifted with her, a symphony of focus and calm authority. Every movement, every word, was deliberate yet effortless. Calloway felt a pang of admiration, tinged with shame for his earlier arrogance. He realized that the true measure of leadership was not how loudly one commanded, but how effectively one shaped outcomes while inspiring confidence and self-reliance. Elara's approach had done more in an hour than he had accomplished in decades of ceremony, meetings, and displays of rank. As the session ended, officers filed out, energized and thoughtful. Calloway remained, studying her quietly, processing the lessons, both tactical and human. He understood that he had been humbled, not by failure alone, but by the presence of someone whose quiet competence illuminated the cracks in his own assumptions. That evening, Fort Braddock's mess hall was quieter than usual. Sunset filtered through the large windows, casting long shadows across the tables. Elara sat alone again, a plate of food before her, hands resting gently on the tray. She did not eat immediately, taking a moment to observe the room, the people, and the unspoken currents of authority and expectation. Calloway entered quietly, pausing a few steps away. He did not approach immediately, instead letting the gravity of the moment sink in. This was not a confrontation, nor a challenge. It was acknowledgement. He watched her, noting the same calm precision, the same subtle confidence, the same quiet assertion of presence. Finally, he approached. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said softly. "No bluster, no authority, only respect. I wanted to say thank you. For yesterday, for today. For everything." Elara looked up, expression composed. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the sentiment without drawing attention to it. The room seemed to exhale, the tension dissolving into shared understanding. Calloway understood that gratitude was more than words, it was recognition of skill, insight, and integrity. The hierarchy of rank mattered less than the hierarchy of competence and moral clarity. Elara continued her meal, serene, deliberate, a model of quiet strength. Calloway stepped back, a new understanding settling over him, that the lessons she imparted extended far beyond the exercise, far beyond the base. They were about life, judgment, and the responsibility that came with both power and humility. As night descended, the base lights shimmered against the twilight. Elara finished her meal, collected her tray, and left with the same silent dignity she had carried from the start. Calloway watched her go, aware that a quiet force had altered not just an exercise, but his understanding of leadership, respect, and the unseen strength of human resilience. Perfect. Here's the final sections 11 of 15 plus the outro, each 380 to 400 words, bringing the story to its emotional climax, resolution, and cinematic close. The following week, Iron Sentinel entered its final phase, a high-stakes simulated operation with multiple branches and complex scenarios. The base hummed with energy and tension. Every officer, every crew member, felt the weight of expectation pressing down like a storm cloud. Yet in the midst of it all, Elara moved with effortless calm. Calloway, now visibly more introspective, watched her from the operations deck. He had studied her movements, decisions, and methods, learning more in the past days than decades of command could teach him. She spoke softly to her team, each instruction deliberate yet unassuming, her presence commanding without demanding. The exercise began. Simulated strikes, intelligence failures, and counter-moves unfolded across the network. Calloway attempted to regain control, but every decision he made was anticipated, redirected, or neutralized, not through brute force but through subtle orchestration. The room pulsed with tension, officers murmuring in disbelief at the precision and foresight Elara displayed. At one point, a critical simulated breach occurred, threatening the entire operation. Calloway snapped commands, expecting immediate compliance. Elara observed, a quiet smile playing at the corners of her mouth. With a single adjustment, subtle, almost imperceptible, the threat was contained, the chain reaction stopped. The room fell silent. Every officer recognized, in that moment, the difference between authority and true mastery. Calloway's chest tightened. He realized that his perception of power had been incomplete, limited by ego and tradition. Here was a person who wielded influence without visibility, authority without spectacle, skill without ego. And in that understanding, a profound humility took root, quietly reshaping his worldview. Later that evening, the base quieted. Elara walked among the simulation rooms, checking logs, confirming results, and offering brief clarifications to her team. She moved like a shadow, unnoticed but integral. Her presence reminded everyone that real influence was often silent, uncelebrated, yet absolute. Calloway approached her again, this time without entourage, without audience. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said quietly, "I need to understand how you do it. Not just the systems, but the way you lead." His voice lacked the bluster of rank, replaced by genuine curiosity. Elara turned, expression calm. "It's not about leading with authority," she said softly. "It's about anticipating outcomes, observing patterns, and acting where it matters most. Visibility is optional. Responsibility is not." She paused, letting her words sink in. "True leadership is measured by results and the growth of those around you, not by medals or applause." Calloway absorbed this quietly. For the first time, he understood the weight of humility, the necessity of listening, and the power of silent competence. He had faced challenges, crises, and threats before, but none had reshaped him like this quiet lesson in mastery and restraint. The final debrief brought every officer together. Screens displayed the outcomes of the week's operations, revealing vulnerabilities, successes, and critical insight. Calloway's earlier pride had been replaced by reflection. He spoke not to command, but to acknowledge, to learn. Elara summarized patterns, vulnerabilities, and lessons with clarity and precision. Her voice, calm yet compelling, filled the room. Each officer felt the weight of her presence, not through fear, but through respect earned silently. The hall was quiet except for the rhythmic tap of her finger against the digital interface, every motion deliberate, every insight poignant. The officers left with a new understanding of authority, strategy, and humility. Calloway lingered, absorbing the lesson deeper than any report could convey. The exercise had not only tested operational readiness, it had tested character, perception, and moral clarity. Night fell over Fort Braddock. Elara returned to her quarters, closing the door softly behind her. The room was quiet, the same Spartan efficiency as before. She checked her notes one last time, cataloging outcomes, observations, and small human errors she had seen during the exercise. She touched the phoenix patch again, feeling its texture beneath her fingertip. It was a symbol of resilience, rebirth, and quiet power. In that moment, she allowed herself a small smile. The world outside her door was loud, chaotic, and unknowing, but she had made a difference. One quiet, unseen, precise action at a time. Calloway stood outside her quarters, pausing. He did not knock. He simply recognized the person who had reshaped his understanding of leadership. Authority was no longer measured by rank or fear, but by insight, patience, and the courage to act with precision in silence. Weeks later, the base had returned to routine, but nothing felt the same. Officers moved with newfound awareness, respect rippling subtly through the ranks. Calloway often found himself reflecting on Elara's calm mastery, her quiet lessons echoing in every decision he made. Elara walked among them, unnoticed yet essential, a quiet presence guiding outcomes with wisdom and foresight. She did not seek recognition, yet the change she had inspired was visible in every attentive gaze, every thoughtful decision, every silent acknowledgement of competence over ego. The sunset painted the horizon crimson, the colors of the phoenix, symbolizing resilience, renewal, and silent mastery. Elara Morgan stood at the edge of the observation tower, the wind lifting her hair, eyes steady on the horizon. Somewhere in the world, someone underestimated her. And she would be there, ready, not for glory, but to ensure the truth of skill, judgment, and integrity prevailed. Elara's quiet courage reminds us that true power is earned, not declared. One person's steadfast integrity can reshape the world around them. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and press the bell icon to follow more tales of ordinary people achieving extraordinary truth.